Well, after just doing our first 2600 Panda review, we figured, we're such big Atari guys, we got to jump right back into this. And what better way to do it than with the best selling Atari 2600 cartridge in its long and storied lifetime? And a game that I think it's fair to say Kelly has some deep rooted feelings about. More so,
Hmm.
I have feelings about it, but not the same way that Kelly does. I'm not an original purchaser, so I went in with eyes open, knowing what this game was and was not. So, Kelly, do you want to walk us through a young Mr. Tool going in wide eyed and the world, the world being his oyster, and where you ended up?
March 16th, 1982, 4 p.m. I walk into combination record store, video game store where I had been saving money up for a long time to buy a video game cartridge for our telegames, Atari 2600. Um, and it was Pac-Man. Pac-Man was coming out, and it was loved playing the Atari already, and now I was gonna be able to play Pac-Man on it. And they had done a lot of advertising, and boy, this is gonna be great. Brought it home, popped it in the system, played it for about 5 minutes, and never played it again. Horrible, horrible experience. It's not gonna do well or anything.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert. I don't think either one of us are championing this title. I do think it's important though, and we've mentioned this on the last couple of Panda reviews, that I do think it's important that we do a bad game here and there. Of course, we want to talk about the games we've enjoyed and play those again and share games with each other and stuff like that. But just to kind of give people a baseline of where we're at, though, I do think every once in a while we need to throw in Pac-Man for Atari 2600, just so people can kind of get an idea of where our heads are on stuff. So, because I think it is hard to gauge, like, okay, I'm going to go see what Kelly and Mike said about this game because my tastes align with theirs. But to really know that, you have to know what we don't like as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this one's not like a big aha. I mean, we're
Yeah.
not going to be waving people off. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of people as stupid as I was. They go, I've got to
Do you,
go.
do you remember how much new cartridges cost at that time?
Uh, so I thought the cartridges typically were around $20, and this one
Okay.
was like 30, close to 35 or 40.
Because I
And
did
that's
see, I tried to do a little bit of research just because I wasn't an original purchaser of this. So I knew going into it, all right, this is a bad game. I knew all the kind of history of it. And of course, buying Atari stuff now, I go on, those ideas of what prices are, not what it cost at the time. And that was a thing. I did see a couple things mentioned. This was a little pricier than cartridges normally are. And we've mentioned before, I'm a big champion of 32X. And I, at the time, remember not understanding why a lot of people didn't like Mortal Kombat 2 on 32X when it was clearly a gigantic step above the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo versions. What I wasn't accounting for at the time, I guess because I bought it with gift cards and things people gave me for my birthday, is it came out just months after the 16-bit versions, which were $50, and most people had already bought those. And then the 32X cartridge was $75. So essentially, you already bought a $50 cartridge for your Genesis, and now they wanted you to put out 75 more dollars for the upgraded version. And that's what people were pissed about. So I could definitely see, and that was something I wasn't thinking at the time because I distinctly remember I bought it with gift cards. So I can imagine, if you're used to Atari cartridges being a certain price point, especially classic games, and then you go and purchase this and it was even more money, this is what you got.
yeah, and especially because in those days wasn't exactly rolling in the dough, shall we say? Now of course I swim in Atari tokens and everything's fine. And I have
In
no
his
worry, and
Scrooge McDuckian digital vault of Atari
yeah.
tokens.
So I've got that going on now. But that was and so going in, uh, a cartridge purchase was I had to kind of get ready for it, and then I come in and like because the advertising said it was coming out. Advertising didn't tell me that I was going to pay more than I had paid for my last cartridge. And so I was like, oh, but it's Pac-Man. It's going to be okay. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. So let's start off this panda review, shall we? We're going to go with fun factor. I'm giving it a one. I'm giving it a one.
Can you follow up on that or just one?
I think I've covered. There's nothing fun about this, so I can't. I won't give it a zero, but I'm going to give it a one because the and I guess we'll get to it on visual appeal. I've got things to say, but I mean one of the biggest things to begin with is the and I understand the nature of Atari and how a horizontal game versus a vertical game is going to be a different deal and kind of an issue a little bit. It can be done, but the easy way out is not to. And when you do learn, one guy had to code it. He wasn't given a lot of time. Kind of the
Yeah, I
doom
was gonna say
on
this definitely put me in Doom 3DO
the.
mindset. He
And I
wasn't
see.
given the source code. He was given a crunch time frame. It was one person who had to do it. And just to add insult to injury, Atari at that time was coming out with 8 kilobyte cartridges, and they were like, "No, you have to do this on the old 4 kilobyte cartridge." So they cut his ability to even put content on the cartridge in half, on top of all the other restrictions.
Yeah, and in what's textbook idiot executive behavior, the Atari bigwigs had said, "Well, you can't make the background black because the only Atari games that have a black background are those that are in space." And so what was already not going to look very much like the game, they said, we can double down on that. Let's really make it not look like the game." So you get this puke blue background. So one panda.
Yeah, I'm one panda as well. It's not a zero. Like I did have a little bit of fun with it. I think if I came across a loose cartridge in the wild for $1 or something, I'd pick it up just to throw it in every once in a while and laugh at it. But other than that, I'm not going to revisit this or anything like that. I'm not the biggest Pac-Man fan in the world. I acknowledge its place, obviously, in the pantheon of gaming and all that. And there's a billion Pac-Man clones out there, some of which, and a mild spoiler alert, at the end of this, I'm going to tell you a game you should play instead of this game that's also on Atari 2600. But yeah, this is there's better Pac-Man games and better Pac-Man clone games on this console. And again, the limitations, which it's probably worth mentioning again when we get to the visual appeal aspect of it, but the limitations are there. I don't blame the guy who made this because this is very much a Doom 3DO situation. He was handed a terrible situation and just did what he could in the tiny amount of time that he had. And it looks it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of I mean the ET guy, same deal.
Yeah.
That again put behind the eight ball on some things, but at least on the ET side of the equation, he kind of ran the gameplay ideas by people like I don't know Spielberg, and oh yeah, sounds good. So I mean he's got some other people. This guy they're like go figure it out. So
Have fun.
but
And
there's
very much
trouble.
again in the to draw the comparisons, very much like Doom, where they gave the one person working on it just a physical retail copy of it. They just let him play Pac-Man. Didn't give any sort of code or anything, especially no source code or anything like that. They were just like, go play Pac-Man and then just figure it out.
Yeah, and this the gentleman his name's Todd Fry, and you should be suspicious of him because he misspells both of his first and last name. He does Todd with one D and adds an E on the end of Fry. Totally both leaving a
So
letter,
how
adding a
many D's
letter.
are in Fry?
No, Todd, the D's on the Todd side, the E's on the Fry side on the end there, that silent E. So so that it's not his fault either, but I don't like this game. So he's gonna get spilled over. So we're both at one on that. Controls, begrudgingly, I'll give it a two, because uh, it it again, it plays into some of the basic Atari stuff in terms of, the Atari joystick's not a four position joystick, so you do occasionally have to kind of make sure you hit things right on it. But once you were used to playing Atari and using the joystick, you could pretty reliably do what you needed to do to kind of keep that uh, uh, vertical and horizontal axis stuff going okay. So the controls work okay. I mean, Pac-Man controls are a joystick. That's it, and it's responsive enough. Um, so I'll give it a two. Don't want to, but squeeze a two out of me on that one. So
Kelly's being a little kinder than me today. I'm going to give it a one. I'll just say the controls work. For a game that's controls are just moving up, down, left, and right. There are times when I found it difficult to get around corners and things like that, or especially when because like a lot of Atari games, you can crank up the difficulty on it. As soon as you start moving a little bit faster, you're not in control of Pac-Man anymore. It just speeds around the screen in a blur. It's not an easy to control game. It technically you do control him, so that's where the one comes in. It meets the extremely minimal requirements, but not well. And there's, and I'm sure we'll bring this up closer to the end, but I mean, there's been additional versions of Pac-Man for other Atari consoles. There's been homebrew games that have corrected a lot of issues, but Atari themselves put out Miss Pac-Man after this, and that controlled great. So this is broken. The controls on this because the Miss Pac-Man controls fine. It feels super tight, responsive. You can get around corners easily, and I never felt that on this one.
yeah, and I'm going to ask our mascot and technician G. Mike Lies-a-lot to go down there on there and knock a panda off that controls. Move me down to a one too. I'm with Mike, so we're sitting with one on that. So thanks, Mike. Appreciate G. Mike. Appreciate you doing that for us. And so we're both ones on controls. Difficulty. So this is that right sizing of difficulty for optimum enjoyment, which is not present in this game, and I give it a one.
Just enjoyment in general is not present
Just
in this
not.
game.
It was like there's a component of the difficulty is like it's difficult. The difficulty hits the right spot to make the game enjoyable. It's like, well, that didn't happen. Therefore, difficulty one.
I'm gonna go one as well. There's the because the controls are poor, and the layout of the maze isn't ideal because instead of thinking of it as a horizontal maze instead of a vertical maze, it looks and feels like they stretched out a maze. That's kind of how it plays, which makes taking those corners, in my opinion, even harder because you just don't have the tight movements anymore. So, and then as soon as you crank up the difficulty in the different game modes, in my opinion, it becomes basically impossible to play. So it's a one.
Yeah, and if there's one thing Atari could do, and I mean, I guess we'll probably actually gets in. We'll wait. I'll wait for this one. I've got more to say, but I need to save this. There, but I'll save it for going through. So we'll move on to replayability. What replayability? One.
Yeah, it's a one for me. I mean, there's first off, there's homebrew hack games, Pac-Man 4K and Pac-Man 8K. So Pac-Man 4K was a homebrew project to see if they could, using the same ROM size, make a better version of Pac-Man. Now, of course, this is with a lot more time and everything we've learned about Atari, other people have learned about Atari development since then. So they had way more resources than the actual guy who made this did. It's better. It's not, it's still not perfect though. And they did make an even better version, Pac-Man 8K, as if they had had access to the 8K cartridge, which Atari didn't let them use to develop this. But, you know, themselves, they put out, again, Ms. Pac-Man, which looks and plays way better than this. So that's, yeah, why would you play this? And then there's a lot of Pac-Man clone games, some of which also play way better than this. And one I'll throw out at the end is you should play instead of this. So that's a one for me.
Yeah, yeah, it was agree wholeheartedly. Um, yeah, I didn't even replay it after I bought it. That's
I found myself even playing it. I'd played it before, but even playing it again for this review, I was like, I'd rather go play Miss Pac. And then I was like, I'd rather go play the other game that I'll recommend at the end.
I'd rather take a nap. I'd rather get a root canal. I'd rather pick a fight with a badger. There's a lot of things you'd rather do than play this game. So, okay. So now I get a visual appeal. Now I can get in there. I'm giving it a one again. So first of all, and again, we're not laying all this on the programmers thing. We've mentioned that yeah, limited time, had to hit a deadline, no resource. It's him, so it's just him. Stupid rules like you can't use black, so you already put the guy at a huge deficit to begin with if you're trying to emulate the arcade experience in any way, shape, or form. But the one thing this was going to get out earlier, to have saved it. The one thing Atari can do awesome is create a box, create a square, create a pixel-like thing. Just because Atari's built for that. You need a dot. I got you a dot. There it is. Varying sizes of dots. It can be really small, like an adventure, or it can be something larger for Pong kind of stuff. And so you could do a square, but no, they got to put wafers in there for the little pills that the Pac-Man gobbles up, which was like not a black background. You got basically looks like they're all like marked like highways on there. Recognize Atari's limitations on sound to a degree, although some of the versions you mentioned really narrow the gap on that as well. The ghosts all the same color in this version, kind of takes out a little of the fun of the different names of the ghosts and all that when they all look exactly the same. So just nothing to like about it at all. One on visual appeal.
Yeah, so one on visual appeal. To what Kelly was saying. So again, this isn't Fry with 7Ds in its fault, but right off the bat, I mentioned in our last 2600 review, judging the graphics in Berserk was really tough. Just like it was tough to judge the graphics on Road Rash. Those are the two that I really struggle with. And if we ever go back and like re-rate stuff, maybe I'd change them. But ultimately, what I landed on with Berserk was it looks like the arcade game. Like at a glance, if you know Berserk, that's Berserk. And we both mentioned that didn't always happen on Atari 2600. So it matters if you can look at it and immediately know what it is. And I don't think anybody would argue that as big and classic a game as Berserk is, it's nowhere near the tower that Pac-Man is over almost any. If there was a Mount Rushmore of video games, Pac-Man would have to be on there, whether you're a fan of it or not, just because of its insane impact on the industry as a whole. And this isn't instantly recognizable as Pac-Man somehow. And Pac-Man is such a simplistic looking game. And somehow this completely misses the mark at a glance. You'd have to really watch somebody playing it to be like, oh, this is a Pac-Man like game. I would think if I didn't know that this was one of the many Pac-Man kind of ripoffs that came in its wake, not an actual port of Pac-Man itself. That's how much this doesn't look like Pac-Man. Um, Now, again, the stupidity of the blue background versus black because Pac-Man's not in space, which is not only dumb, but to me, it raises questions of were they saying that Pac-Man is like a grounded in reality? Like, you're going to confuse people. What if they run into a Pac-Man in the wild?
But you're not. You should. Last I saw you in a game, you were in space.
Yeah,
And who's to say Pac-Man's not in space? There is no Pac-Man backstory.
right. This just brings up so many questions about Pac-Man's backstory and how Atari feels really strongly about it and stuff like that. So that's interesting. The ghosts that Kelly mentioned. So I grew up playing NES. NES had a lot of limitations on the number of sprites that could be on screen at a time. A lot of companies still put more sprites on there anyway. And what would happen if there was too many sprites on a particular line? they would flicker because they couldn't all be in the same frame at the same time. Atari 2600 obviously was a lot worse. One of the big problems with Pac-Man, as simplistic as you would think it would be to program for it, was the sprite limitations of Atari 2600. And there's a bunch of ghosts and Pac-Man. So there's actually more sprites than it can handle. The flicker in this is insane. And I'm used to flickering games because again, there's a lot of Nintendo NES games that flicker a lot. And even ones that I really like because they were just like, well, we'll sacrifice the visual appeal a little bit in these, heavier action scenes for the overall gameplay. This is just Pac-Man. Like you're just moving around the screen and they just flicker constantly. And again, going back to the time constraints, other games, the Pac-Man knockoffs and Miss Pac-Man don't flicker like this. Some of them don't flicker at all. Miss Pac-Man flickers, but not as much. And it turns out there was a way. The reason it's flickering so bad is they're not on every frame. The ghosts, they alternate frames. There was a way to kind of cheat it to make the flickering more manageable, but they wouldn't give him the extra time to do it. They're like, nah, that looks fine.
Well,
Somebody
good
at
to go.
Atari was like, seizures are part of the experience of playing this game. So again, this is a lot of this is just terrible corporate decision making going into it. So you have the blue background, you have the flicker. It looks stretched out, and I know it's going from vertical horizontal, but a lot of other games, other Pac-Man games, Miss Pac-Man, and the knockoffs just rearrange the mazes so that they look better in a horizontal thing rather than just elongate the mazes. This does recycle mazes again because of the memory limitations. So you're just playing the same couple of levels over and over again. It's missing it's missing the home screen. It's missing the, if you want to call them cutscenes, the little animations between each of the levels, totally gone. The ghost colors are gone. And the pellets, because there wasn't enough memory to put other sprites on screen, the reason they look the way they are, I found out from looking this up, is because they're just pieces of the wall. That's why they look like that, because they literally couldn't put anything else on the screen. So it's just like pieces of the same thing that make up the wall in the background.
Yeah, and then the fruit, the kind of bonus fruit you can get there too. It's a block. It's just this square brown thing that
It's just a brown square, like fruit. Look,
yeah, after
when
a
you're going
few
through the produce section in your local grocery store, and you're like, hey, where do you keep your brownish bricks? Those are what I was looking for.
yeah, so it was a mess. So visual appeals a one. Um so they printed 20 million, excuse me, 12 million
12
of
million.
these bad boys. Um, at the time, about 20 million units had sold of the Atari 2600 options. There were, to Atari's best knowledge, and they're super sharp over there at Atari is X, but they kind of figured there was around 10 million active users still. So you got a user base of 10 million, you make 12 million. It gets worse down the road, Mike can point out, but they did end up selling about 8 million, a little over 8 million of them. So it is their number one seller, as Mike mentioned.
Yeah, like Kelly said, there was apparently a unprecedented uh, advertising campaign behind this thing, which sold tons of units. And to a degree, it kind of worked the way they thought. Atari's idea was that if they, because of the popularity of Pac-Man, because there were so many systems in the wild, then maybe it'll bring some players who would abandon it back to the system. And it kind of did. I mean, it sold 8 million copies, even if, and I think those were optimistic projections given how great they are, knowing their own base. 10 million might have been a little bit optimistic. Most of those people bought Pac-Man. So in a way, it did work. It did bring people back to it. It was obviously the most popular game. So imagine if it was actually a good game,
Yeah.
what, what it could have done. Because from everything I understand, the backlash was almost immediate. The reviews were terrible. Fans were incensed by this.
Yeah, it was a huge disappointment, and you were kind of misled on because they're very very strategic in that you did not see gameplay.
Yeah.
Smart move on the advertisements because it folks may have come back, but they turned around and left right again anyway because this was not this was not something that's going to keep people around for sure.
No. And I could be wrong. I'm sure somebody in the comments will let us know. I swear when I was looking up some of the advertisements for it, in at least one of the advertisements, it shows Pac-Man moving up and down. There is no up and down animation for Pac-Man in this. There's only left and right. So he just stays static left or right when he moves up or down. There's no actual animation of him moving up and down. The static sprite just goes up and down like he's on an elevator. And I swear, in at least one of the advertisements, it shows as if he's enemy. So it is just lying at that point.
Yep, yes indeed.
By the way,
So
Ms.
easy
Pac-Man
math.
moves up and down. So it was totally possible.
Yep. Yeah, and then the later versions of the 4K version and things that you get colors, you get significantly less flicker because, like I said, it was, your point is, you couldn't eradicate it, but you could really tamp it down quite a bit to where but this is, strobe effect on the first version of Pac-Man. So there are good versions out there. So math is easy on this one. Um, 5 for me total, 5 for Mike total. I don't really even need to look our lists up. This occupies the bottom of both of
Yeah.
our lists at this point in time. So this one was super easy for all that. I didn't have to try and multitask to check some of that stuff out. So
But I do
that's
want to, because I do like staying positive with stuff, I do want to throw out, we mentioned Ms. Pac-Man's way better. Pac-Man 4K and 8K, the homebrewers are out there. I want to throw out an original 2600 game, the Atari 2600 version of Alien, the movie. It is a Pac-Man knockoff. There is no flicker, multiple colors, at least as many sprites, I want to say, on the screen. And it came out around the same time, or maybe a year or two later. So, I mean, obviously, it was possible to do better, even at the time, with a little bit of more time and money. And again, this isn't Fry with the D's fault that it's like that. This is Atari's fault that it's like that. But I highly recommend Alien. It is a blatant knockoff of Pac-Man. They even sort of approximate a vertical view by putting a border on the sides. So it gives the maze more of a vertical feel to it. But this is my main sales pitch for it. It's Pac-Man if Pac-Man had a gun. It's awesome.
you missed your calling. You should have been a marketer. That would have worked. Excellent. Good. So let us know your thoughts. But if your thoughts are this was a good game, don't bother. Not interested in hearing that.
Just type a comment, I am wrong.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you have to, and we'll understand.
But let us know your thoughts and if there are other alternatives that you'd also like to point to. I think it's great call on a contemporary version there with the Alien. So I'd recommend that as well. Cool. All right, anything to add, sir?
No, I think that's it. This is our obviously our lowest ranking. I'm curious as to, obviously we don't want to do a bunch of bad games. That's not our thing. But it when we do another bad one in the future, I wonder if it's going to be something that could actually dethrone this as the worst. I don't know what the right
I
terminology is there.
I know the personal scar is going to make it hard because I don't. We'll have to check with the Institute of Panda on whether we can legitimately give something 0 pandas or whether we were forced by social contract to at least allow 1 panda for each of these. So we'll have
Yeah,
to
we
check on
have
that.
never discussed that. So
Yeah, we'll have to sort that out. But you'll probably want to keep tabs on that, know how things are going. So really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the Bog Band YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when updates come out and we roll out additional details on the Panda rating system, which we may be applying to other things down the road. A little spoiler for you there. And also, by that subscription, you'll be able to check out Daily Hard No, the world's shortest podcast. And that's available for you on the YouTube channel and YouTube music as well.
And you'll want to keep coming back to that, unlike this game.
Bog Panda.